Louis Gibson was 17 when, in March 1993, he opened fire on two cars near the End Zone Lounge in New Orleans. One car held his friend Latrone Davis, who was 19, and three others. Gibson stepped out from behind a parked car and fired many rounds at Davis's vehicle. Davis did not survive. Three other young men, Christopher Everett, Terrence King, and Adolph Scott, were hurt. None of the people in the cars had any weapons. This sudden confrontation came just hours after Gibson and some companions had earlier fired at a nearby house. That earlier shooting followed a dispute over local narcotics territory. Gibson grew up in the Central City area of New Orleans. He and Davis had known each other since childhood. Their neighborhood was poor and offered few safe places for young people. By his teens, Gibson was spending time with local narcotics crews. His home life was hard too. His sisters have said the family faced many struggles. They remember walls of trouble around every street corner. The court case moved quickly. On October 7, 1993, Gibson was charged with first-degree homicide. On October 29, he entered a plea of not guilty. The trial began on July 10, 1995. Witnesses said they saw Gibson stand in the street and fire at Davis's car from close range. They also saw him aim at the second car. Those who survived identified him in a photo lineup. They said no one in either car had a weapon. They named two of his partners, Patrick Campbell and Miguel, but agreed these partners had not fired any shots. A jury found Gibson guilty of second-degree homicide in mid-July 1995. He asked for a new trial, and the court granted it in October 1995. But an appeal court reversed that decision in September 1996. On October 24, 1996, he received a sentence of life at hard labor. He was given no chance of probation, parole, or suspension of sentence. Why did Gibson fire on his friend and the others that night? Court testimony pointed to earlier fights. One involved a man named Gerald Berryhill and another named Travis Epps. After those fights, Gibson and his group shot at the house. The lounge shooting was part of ongoing neighborhood tensions. It was no sudden outburst. Gibson seemed to be sending a clear warning. Prosecutors used these facts to show he planned the event. In prison, Gibson worked as a maintenance helper at the Louisiana State Police inmate barracks in Baton Rouge. He cleaned aircraft and helped with other tasks. After almost 24 years behind bars, changes in Louisiana law gave hope to those sentenced as juveniles. Some bills proposed parole hearings after 25 years, others after 30. By 2017, Gibson, then 41, was preparing for a possible hearing under the new rules. At Gibson's trial, his lawyer argued that gang pressures, not a personal feud, drove him to act. Survivors said there was no sign of danger in the cars. They said no warning was given. The court had to decide if he feared for his safety or planned it all. The jury sided with the view that this was a planned act. By August 5, 2025, more than 32 years after the shootings, Louis Gibson is 49 years old. He still appears in prison records as serving life with no parole. Louisiana's reforms may offer him a chance for freedom one day, but so far he has not had a hearing. What Louis Gibson did cost him decades of freedom. But what happens when a teenager with nothing in his hands is forced to admit to something he might not have done? Corey Williams was born in Louisiana. He grew up in the Queensboro neighborhood of Shreveport. By age 16, he had faced severe challenges. He had extreme lead poisoning. His IQ was around 68. He still sucked his thumb. He often wet himself. He had been in the hospital many times because of his intellectual disability. Corey's family did not have much money. Relatives called him a chump because he would take the blame for others. His limited thinking skills left him exposed. He struggled to speak up for himself when things got tough. On the evening of January 4, 1998, Corey and some neighborhood friends decided to get a pizza. The group included Chris Moore, who was 20 at the time, and two brothers, Gabriel and Nathan Logan. A 23-year-old man named Jarvis Griffin delivered the pizza. After he walked back to his car, he was fatally shot from a gunshot. The men then took the pizza and the money from his car. Witnesses said the older men carried out the theft after the shooting. Later, only Chris Moore pointed at Corey and said Corey had fired the gun. Nothing at the scene tied Corey to the weapon. The gun had fingerprints that matched Nathan Logan, not Corey. The victim's DNA ended up on Gabriel Logan's shirt. The money was split among the men. So why did Corey admit he did it? Police took him to the station and kept him awake for 12 hours. At first, he told officers that Gabriel Logan was the shooter. He said Gabriel had threatened to harm him if he spoke up. But under nonstop questioning, Corey broke down. He said he had shot the man. Then he asked, "Can I go home and lie down?" That shaky statement became the heart of the case against him. In October 2000, a jury found Corey guilty of first-degree taking a life. The decision leaned heavily on his forced confession and Chris Moore's words. Prosecutors described a grand plan involving all the men. His lawyers said the others were the ones who shot and took the items. After the trial, lawyers uncovered secret recordings that police never shared. Those tapes showed some witnesses blamed Gabriel and Nathan Logan. They also hinted the men had tried to pin the shooting on Corey. The red stains on Gabriel's shirt, the fingerprints on the gun, and how the money was divided all seemed to point away from Corey. But his forced statement carried more weight in court. When the jury convicted him, the judge gave Corey the harshest punishment possible. In 2002, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that people with intellectual disabilities cannot face capital punishment. A judge agreed Corey was disabled. His sentence was changed to life without any chance of release. Corey spent the next 20 years in Angola prison. His case rested on a false confession. In 2015, a new district attorney found those hidden tapes. They showed that important, exonerating statements had been kept secret. That discovery reopened his case. In May 2018, local authorities offered Corey a plea deal. He accepted responsibility for actions that resulted in someone's passing, along with misleading authorities. He gave up all his appeals. His original conviction was wiped away. Because he had already spent more than 20 years in prison, he was allowed to go home. In 2025, at 43, Corey lives outside those walls. He cannot get back the years he lost. But, at last, the justice system corrected its mistake. Next, a teenager's attempt to prove himself ends in the unthinkable inside the home of an elderly woman who never saw it coming. DaVon McCulla grew up in Alexandria, in Rapides Parish, Louisiana. He lived in a part of town where street groups were active. At 17, he was tied to an incident that would change his life forever. We know little about his family. He was a black youth who went to Alexandria Junior High School. He had an IQ of 82 after suffering a brain injury during pretrial detention. That injury left him with some thinking and movement challenges. On October 24, 1994, 82-year-old Rita Rabelais was found in her home on Kelly Street in Alexandria. She had been struck with a blunt object and wounded with a sharp item. Investigators thought the reason was theft. They believed she was targeted because she lived alone and was thought to have money. It's also said the incident was part of a street group initiation. McCulla and the others joined in to prove themselves. A key witness was Jerry Joseph. He agreed to a reduced charge in exchange for sharing what he saw. He said Davion helped plan the break-in. Joseph said he saw Davion hit the woman over the head with a metal pipe. Others then beat and wounded her in the kitchen. The confrontation was sudden and chaotic. Joseph did not see Davion use the sharp item, but he saw the group clean up afterward. They even hid her body in a closet. In early 1995, Davion faced a first-degree homicide charge along with his co-defendants. That changed by October 1999. He was found guilty of second-degree homicide instead. The jury agreed he meant to do serious harm, but they did not find enough proof of long-planned intent. While waiting for trial, Davion suffered a brain injury that required surgery. Doctors later noted memory problems and speech trouble. Still, they said he could take part in his defense and stand trial. At trial, Joseph's testimony was central. No fingerprints, footprints, or other forensic traces tied Davion directly to the scene. His shoe prints did not match those at the house, though others did. The jury's verdict meant life in prison with no chance to leave early. Louisiana law set that penalty for anyone under 18 at the time of the act. Before the trial's final phase, Davion spoke up. He said he did not agree with his lawyer's plan to accept a life sentence. He claimed he was innocent. He told the judge he would rather not spend his life in prison. Then he asked to be found guilty. As of August 5, 2025, he remains at the Louisiana State Penitentiary. In 2012, the U.S. Supreme Court said it is unfair to force juveniles to spend life behind bars without review. A 2016 ruling made that idea apply to past cases. Davion's lawyers asked for a new sentencing hearing in September 2022. They argued he was not among the worst young offenders and that his injury and age lessened his role. Prosecutors and defense attorneys agreed in early 2023 to let him seek early release. A judge approved the change. That move wiped out more hearings and opened the door for parole. By early 2023, at about 45 years old, DaVon could ask to be freed on parole. So far, he has not been released. In later review sessions, courts noted he never used the sharp item himself. No forensic proof tied him to the wound. They said he was holding the pipe, but no one claimed he triggered what happened. His youth and health issues have been part of the argument for letting him go early. Remember, he was found guilty of second-degree homicide. That means he meant to cause harm that led to a fatal outcome, but there was no proof he planned it far in advance. This detail has been key in his appeals and chances for release. The next teen had big dreams, a future mapped out. But one decision changed everything. Shamichael Antonio Pearson was 19 years old in March 2022. He lived in the Queensboro neighborhood of Shreveport, Louisiana. Public reports don't give many details about his family or birth date. What is clear is that he and Devin Dwayne Myers had clashed before. On March 3, 2022, 17-year-old Devin went to a friend's house in Queensboro to pick up a phone charger. He had just celebrated his birthday the day before. Devin was a rising star on the Huntington High School basketball team. Coaches called him focused, respectful, and determined. He was hoping to land a college scholarship. He met up with Shamichael, but their earlier disagreements set a tense scene. Shamichael is said to have walked up to Devin and asked, "Didn't I tell you I was going to get you?" Then he used a firearm against him. Devin was struck by bullets as many as 13 times. Most of those hits were in his back. At least 2 bullets struck him after he had fallen to the ground. Surveillance footage later showed Shamichael leaving the area in a hoodie and dark pants, walking away as if nothing happened. Later, investigators searched Shamichael's home. They found a 9mm Glock hidden inside a freezer. DNA testing linked the gun to Shamichael. It was confirmed to be the weapon used against Devin. The freezer had been duct taped shut. Officers said it looked like someone was trying to bury evidence in plain sight. His phone was also examined. GPS data placed him walking from a Piggly Wiggly store, where he worked part-time, directly toward the shooting location minutes before the incident. Why did their argument end this way? Court testimony said the motive came from their prior conflict. No more precise details were shared. Friends said the two had exchanged words in the past, something about disrespect during a pickup game. But no one expected it to turn fatal. The case went to Caddo Parish District Court. Prosecutors Sam Crichton and Christopher Bowman laid out the evidence, the weapon, the history between the two young men, and the events of that day. Defense attorneys Michael Enright and Dave Nadler argued on Shamichael's behalf. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. On March 9, 2023, they found Shamichael responsible for second-degree homicide. On March 27, 2023, Judge Chris Victory sentenced him to life in prison with no chance of probation or release. At least 10 members of Devin's family and several of Pearson's relatives were in the courtroom for the sentencing. Pearson didn't speak. He looked at the floor. Devin's mother broke down as the sentence was read. Upcoming is a girl whose hidden trauma played out in a tragedy no one saw coming. Bunak Hannah Landon was a teenager living in Harahan, Jefferson Parish, Louisiana, when the incident took place. She was born in Cambodia and spent part of her childhood in a refugee camp under Khmer Rouge rule. Her defense team later said she struggled with ongoing stress from those experiences. As an adult, she worked on the Gulf Coast under the names Valentina and Hannah. That is where she met Bella's father at a club in Baton Rouge. They began a relationship that lasted about 4 years. During that time, Landon often cared for Bella and her older sister at the family home in Imperial Woods. On April 25, 2023, Bella's father was working late. Landon watched Bella, who was 6, and her older sister. Bella had been telling people she was afraid of Landon. Teachers and her grandmother heard Bella say, "Miss Hannah is mean to me." They also saw her grades drop and her worry grow. The day before Bella passed away, she told her parents and her therapist that she felt unsafe. Around 7:30 p.m., after Bella's grandmother left, events took a tragic turn. Surveillance cameras showed Landon pulling a blue canvas wagon. Inside was a 13-gallon bucket holding Bella's 48-pound body. Landon moved it less than a quarter mile. She left the bucket on the front lawn of Bella's mother's house at about 9:35 p.m. Then she returned to Bella's father's home before leaving the area entirely. Why did Landon harm Bella? The prosecution said Landon resented Bella. They said she saw the child as a threat to her relationship with the girl's father. A forensic psychologist found that Landon had several personality traits and depression. The expert said Landon planned her actions and was aware of what she was doing. Evidence included her repeated searches for a defense lawyer just before the fatal act. She sent goodbye messages to coworkers. She recorded Bella crying. She even hid her phone afterward. All of this showed she knew right from wrong and acted on purpose. People asked if Landon believed she was helping Bella or if she acted in anger that Bella might take her place with the father. Defense experts said Landon had a break from reality. They pointed to memory gaps, hallucinations, and past trauma. The prosecution disagreed. The defense psychiatrist said Landon could not clearly recall what happened. The prosecution's expert, Dr. Gina Meyer, said that Landon's steps before and after the fatal harm showed planning. This, the expert said, proved she knew right from wrong. Landon pleaded not guilty, and not guilty by reason of insanity. The trial lasted 4 days. On May 1, 2025, the jury met for just 45 minutes. Then they found her guilty on all counts. First-degree wrongdoing that ended Bella's life, and 2 counts of obstructing justice. In their closing statements, the prosecution said Landon knew her actions were wrong and chose to go through with them anyway. They said she showed no regret. The defense argued her trauma left her unable to understand her actions. The jury saw Landon pull a wagon with a body and hide key evidence. Their quick decision suggests they believed the prosecution. On May 6, 2025, Judge Nancy Miller sentenced Landon to life in prison with no chance of release for ending Bella's life. She also added 2 40-year prison terms to run one after the other for the obstruction counts. The judge said she never wanted Landon to leave prison. Family members spoke in court. Bella's 9-year-old sister wrote that Bella was now her guardian angel and said she hoped to forgive Landon someday so they could meet again in heaven. Bella's mother talked about faith and the possibility of change. But both the judge and the family agreed that forgiveness might not come soon. Under Louisiana law, these sentences were required for those convictions. Up next are 2 teens, 1 plan, 1 mother gone. And if you find stories like these important, consider subscribing for more. Jermaine Lewis grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Her mother, Markecia Stone, was 33. Family members say Stone loved her children and did her best despite challenges. Jermaine lived with her mother and her younger siblings. Over time, arguments about where Jermaine would live drove a wedge between them. Late on October 12, 2022, at about 11:00 p.m., people in the Highland Club complex on Jefferson Highway heard gunshots. Responders arrived and found Stone with multiple wounds. She was rushed to the hospital but later passed away from her injuries. Deputies soon located a 16-year-old boy nearby. He admitted firing the weapon. He said someone else had convinced him to do it. Investigators say that person was Jermaine Lewis. They believe she asked Dwayne Barfield, also 16, to harm her mother after one of their fights about her living situation. Before the shooting, she reportedly sent her younger siblings into another room so they wouldn't see what happened. It appears the spark was control over where Jermaine should live. Family sources recall repeated disputes over that issue. Over time, those fights escalated into manipulation and tragedy. In October 2022, both teens were taken into custody and held without bond at the East Baton Rouge Juvenile Detention Center. Barfield was charged with causing fatal harm with a weapon and with carrying an unauthorized weapon. Lewis was booked for her role in planning the incident. Their court dates were pushed into late 2022. As hearings moved forward, Jermaine withdrew her not guilty plea and accepted an agreement in early 2025. On April 2, 2025, at age 18, she formally pleaded guilty to arranging the fatal incident. Under her agreement, she received a life term. Because she was a minor when it happened, she can ask for parole after serving 25 years. Louisiana's rules for young offenders grant that possibility, and she'll receive credit for the time she's already spent in custody. The next teenager said he wanted to feel something, but what he did made him feel worse. Trevor Reese was born around July 31, 1993 in Louisiana. He grew up in St. Francisville, not far from Baton Rouge. He went to Baton Rouge Magnet High School. People who later treated him said he was extremely intelligent. He came from a steady and caring family. There were no signs of past issues or trouble in his background. But behind that stable life, Trevor was going through emotional struggles. He often felt disconnected. He even started to relate to the fictional TV character Dexter. He believed that hurting someone might somehow bring him relief from what he was feeling inside. On June 10, 2010, an 8-year-old boy named Jackson Jacatuso was riding his bike. He was on a quiet wooded trail near the Bluffs Golf Resort in West Feliciana Parish, Louisiana. Jackson was with his mom and some family friends. They were enjoying the day together. Trevor, who was 16 years old at the time, suddenly approached Jackson in the group. He had a box cutter with him. He used it to hurt Jackson in the neck area, causing severe injuries. The injury was so bad that Jackson could not survive it. He collapsed on the trail. People rushed him to the nearby hospital, but the wound had already caused too much damage, and he passed away soon after. Later, Trevor admitted why he chose Jackson. He said it was because Jackson seemed physically weaker. He believed that going through with this act would bring him peace. He was influenced by the fictional character Dexter, but instead of feeling better, Trevor said it only made things worse for him emotionally. Right after it happened, Trevor walked up to a nearby construction crew. He told them that he had hurt someone and asked them to call 911. Officers quickly arrived and took him into custody. A grand jury later charged him with taking someone's life. Although he was a teenager, the court decided he would be tried as an adult. At first, Trevor's legal team claimed he was not mentally stable at the time. Mental health professionals explained that he had become obsessed with people who had taken lives, especially Dexter. One psychiatrist said Trevor thought doing such an act would ease his anxiety. Another expert said Trevor had even imagined scenarios where he would target others, including people on the streets, and how he would handle the situation afterward. In March 2013, Trevor changed his plea. He no longer claimed mental instability. Instead, he admitted what he did and pleaded guilty to a serious offense. He told the court he picked Jackson on purpose because he thought the boy was vulnerable. His plea meant there would be no full trial. The focus would now be on his sentencing and whether he might ever qualify for early release. During the sentencing in August 2013, experts testified about Trevor's behavior and mindset. They said he still fantasized about hurting others. One doctor shared that Trevor had said, "What's the big deal? He would have passed anyway, maybe in a car accident." This showed how little he seemed to understand the value of life. Jackson's grandfather then gave a powerful statement in court. He held up a photo of his grandson and told Trevor to remember that face every night before sleeping. He said he hoped that if Trevor ever left prison, it would only be after passing away. That was his way of expressing the deep pain the family still felt. Trevor also spoke in court. He said he immediately regretted what he had done. "The second it happened, I wanted to take it back," he said. "I hurt your son and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He added, "I hope God helps you. I should be in hell." His words showed the deep shame he now felt. Experts explained that Trevor had wanted to feel like someone special by copying a TV character. He thought it would complete something inside him, but it only made him feel worse. Instead of relief, he felt more guilt and emotional suffering. His father also came forward and said, "I failed my son. We are so ashamed." Judge William Carmichael carefully reviewed the case. He considered Trevor's age, background, mental health, and what had happened. But under the legal standards, especially the Miller v. Alabama ruling, the judge still found the act to be extremely severe. He said it was targeted and had no clear reason that could justify or explain it. He believed Trevor had no real hope for change. The judge said there was nothing in Trevor's past or present that could make early release fair. Trevor Reese was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole, probation, or a suspended sentence. This matched Louisiana's law for second-degree cases of this kind, and the judge agreed that no part of Trevor's history made him deserve a lesser sentence. Trevor is still locked up in West Feliciana Parish Prison. In 2012, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that giving mandatory life sentences to teenagers without a chance for review is not allowed. So Trevor may qualify for a new hearing at some point. In such a hearing, the court would consider his young age and mental development again. But as of mid-2025, he is still behind bars, and no new decisions about his sentence have been made public. The next story takes us to a school gym moments before it became a war zone. James Tate grew up in a rough area in New Orleans, Louisiana. There isn't much public information about his exact birth date or family. What is known is that he was raised in a place where street groups and aggressive behavior was common. In that environment, people often acted based on loyalty and payback. He attended John McDonough High School, located in Mid-City. This school would later become the place where a serious incident took place. On the morning of April 14, 2003, James Tate was 17 years old. He and 18-year-old Stephen R. Williams entered the school carrying dangerous weapons. One of them had an AK-47, and the other had a semi-automatic handgun. At the time, school was in session. Students and staff had gathered in the gym. Tate and Williams started firing into the crowd. It appeared they were aiming at someone or perhaps just into the group. 15-year-old Jonathan "Caveman" Williams was hit multiple times. Reports said he was struck by at least 10 rounds. he didn't survive. 3 female students were also hurt during the shooting. A pregnant student was pushed and injured during the panic that followed. Why did this happen? Investigators said the act was meant as revenge. Just 1 week earlier, a student named Hillard Head Smith Thor from another school had lost his life in a separate street incident. Friends of Smith believed Jonathan Williams had played a part in what happened to Hillard. No proof confirmed this, but the rumor spread quickly. That was enough to lead Tate and others to plan a payback. Was Jonathan truly involved in the earlier situation? That question caused anger and debate in the community. In court, there was no solid evidence connecting him to it. Still, Tate got involved based on street talk and pressure. The next day, on April 15, 2003, both Tate and Williams were taken into custody. Police were led to Tate's grandmother's house through an anonymous tip. Officers arrested both young men. They were both charged with serious offenses. Eventually, 7 people were named in the case. These included Raymond Brown, Tyrone Crump, Herbert Everett, and Michelle Fulton. They were accused of helping plan the incident. Tate's trial was separated from the others. It was scheduled for April 2005. In the end, Tate did not face the most severe charge. He accepted a deal. He pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of manslaughter and also admitted to helping plan the event. The court agreed to this plea, likely because proving direct intent in a chaotic school shooting was difficult. As a result, James Tate was given a 15-year sentence in Louisiana. Stephen Williams, on the other hand, was convicted of second-degree charges. He received a life sentence without the chance of parole. Many people asked why Tate got a lighter sentence. Was it because he cooperated? Or maybe because there was not enough proof showing he had pulled the trigger? That was never clearly explained. But the outcome was that Tate avoided spending the rest of his life in prison, unlike Stephen Williams. Now, how does one New Year's Eve turn fatal in less than 5 seconds? Princeton Howard was a young man from Port Allen in Pointe Coupee Parish, Louisiana. He was 19 years old on December 31, 2023, when he passed. He had attended school in West Baton Rouge Parish through 7th grade before moving to Port Allen. Public reports offer few details about his family life. The night was New Year's Eve. A gathering took place in Pointe Coupee Parish on December 31, 2023. Tensions rose between Howard and a 14-year-old boy who was also there. What began as a spoken argument quickly got out of hand. Security video shows the boy walking toward a parked truck. Inside that truck sat Howard and 3 friends. Suddenly, the boy fired several rounds into the rear window. All 4 people inside were hit by the bullets. Only Howard was struck in a way that proved fatal. The other 3 survived with injuries. Howard was rushed to Pointe Coupee General Hospital but passed away soon after arriving. Why did things end so tragically? It seems the young shooter felt mocked or threatened by Howard at the party. That may never fully explain why he chose to use a gun. There is no record of a long-running grudge between them. The video makes clear it was a deliberate act. Howard was simply seated in the truck when he was shot. 3 others were hurt. The truck and nearby property suffered heavy damage from bullets through multiple windows. In January 2024, authorities took the 14-year-old into custody. He faced 1 count of second-degree homicide, 3 counts of attempted second-degree homicide, and serious property damage. His name was kept confidential because of his age. By October 9, 2024, the young defendant admitted guilt on all charges. He pleaded guilty to 1 count of second-degree homicide, 3 counts of attempted second-degree homicide, and property damage. He accepted a juvenile life sentence, which means he will stay in detention until his 21st birthday. Under Louisiana law, minors convicted of homicide can receive such a term. He won't serve any time beyond age 21. At the sentencing hearing, District Attorney Tony Clayton said, "This is a very sad case of a juvenile choosing to use a gun to settle a dispute. It ended a young person's life and has long-lasting effects on families." The court confirmed the sentence ends when the defendant turns 21. He was handled under juvenile procedures with no transfer to adult court. At the time of the incident, Howard was 19 and living in Louisiana. Next, we go to Louisiana, where even standing outside can still lead to life in prison. Shannon Scott Touche was born on September 1, 1980, in Louisiana. He spent his early life in or near Lake Charles. There isn't much public information about his family. But what's known is that he met Ronald Shaw through work. Touche had helped with the construction of Shaw's new house. That connection would later become an important part of what happened. On the night of March 18, 1998, Touche and two other young men, Ronald James Benson, 21 years old, and Reginald Paul Basile, 22 years old, went to Ronald Shaw's home in Youngsville. Their goal was to break in and steal valuables. Touche had told the other two that Shaw was wealthy and that the house had a safe. He had seen it while working there. The three of them had planned everything about 2 weeks earlier. They knew things could go badly, but they still went ahead with it. Touche stayed outside the home. He acted as a lookout. Meanwhile, Benson and Basile went inside. Both of them had their faces covered and were carrying weapons. That same night, Ronald Shaw and his wife Rosanna came home from the grocery store. As they were entering the garage, Benson and Basile came out from hiding and confronted them. Benson fired 2 times at Ronald. After that, Basile also used his weapon. Ronald did not survive. Then, Benson forced Rosanna to go inside. He told her to open the safe in the bathroom closet. She gave them the cash, about $500 and some jewelry. They ignored other expensive items in the house. As they walked through the house, Rosanna begged them to let her go. She told them she was pregnant. That may have been the reason they didn't harm her. While this was happening, Touche left the scene. He had parked farther away. He got in the car and drove off, taking a share of the money with him. Reports say he received between $300 and $400. At trial, Touche said he only meant to help with stealing money and that he never agreed to hurting anyone. He claimed Benson was the one who planned the whole thing and pushed him into it. He said he didn't really want to take part, but the prosecutors disagreed. They argued that under Louisiana law, someone can still be fully responsible if a person loses their life during a serious offense like this, even if they weren't the one who used the weapon. They said Touche played a major role. He had told the others about Shaw's wealth. He had also helped with planning, brought the items they used to hide their faces, and drove the car used to leave the scene. He also took a share of the stolen money. Touche was first charged with the most serious level of the offense. Later, the charge was changed to a lower level. His trial began on August 8, 2002. Just 1 day later, on August 9, the jury found him guilty. He didn't delay sentencing. He chose to be sentenced right away. The court gave him a life sentence with no chance for parole or probation. He would have to spend his life in prison with hard labor. On June 4, 2003, the Louisiana Court of Appeal reviewed the case. They agreed with both the conviction and the sentence. Touche's lawyer stepped away from the appeal after deciding there were no strong arguments left to make. Touche filed his own appeal and raised 3 points, but the court rejected all of them. Touche was only 17 when this happened. He was legally considered a minor. However, Louisiana law still required a life sentence without parole at that time. This was true even after later rulings by the U.S. Supreme Court, like Miller v. Alabama and Montgomery v. Louisiana, which said that mandatory life sentences for minors should be reviewed. Since Touche's case was from before August 1, 2017, those rulings didn't apply to him. Louisiana officials have continued to push back against allowing parole in older cases like his. The next teen's friend's life was taken. He confessed to nothing. But someone else did, and it cost him everything. Jeremy Burse was just 15 years old in New Orleans back in September 2010. He was growing up in a rough neighborhood and often spent time with a small group of friends. One of those friends was 16-year-old Anthony Davis. There isn't much public information about Jeremy's family, but he was a teenager trying to navigate a difficult environment. In September of that year, Jeremy and Anthony made a plan that changed everything. They decided to confront a security guard in the parking lot of an apartment complex in New Orleans East. Their goal was to take something by force, but things didn't go as planned. As they were leaving, Jeremy fired a shot. That shot bounced off a surface and hit Anthony. He lost his life at just 16 years old. Jeremy was taken into custody 2 days later. This was based on the statement of another teenager named Ricky Stewart. Ricky told the police that Jeremy had admitted to what happened after the incident. According to Ricky, he, Jeremy, Anthony, and another friend drove to the area in a car that wasn't theirs. Ricky claimed he dropped off Jeremy and Anthony and then heard gunfire. He said he later saw Jeremy holding the weapon and heard him say it was a mistake. Based only on Ricky's words, Jeremy was charged with trying to harm someone and with using force during a robbery. Later, the charges were increased to say someone had lost their life during that event. Jeremy stayed in Orleans Parish Prison for nearly 3 years. In June 2013, at the age of 18, he finally went to trial. He was facing a serious charge called felony-related loss of life. This means someone passed away during the course of another illegal act. Ricky, who had been in trouble himself for breaking into property, testified against Jeremy in court. Jeremy was found responsible by the jury. Around this time, the U.S. Supreme Court had made a ruling called Miller v. Alabama in 2012. The court said that giving life sentences with no chance of release to teenagers without looking at the individual situation was not fair, but judges could still give that sentence after a special hearing. Jeremy had that kind of hearing. The judge listened to both sides, but in the end, he still gave Jeremy a life sentence with no chance of getting out. Jeremy was moved to Angola State Prison to begin that sentence. It meant he would likely stay there for the rest of his life. Why did the judge make that decision? In Louisiana at that time, if someone lost their life during another illegal act, it was often treated as extremely serious. The state did not easily allow changes to life sentences for teens. The court believed this case was one of those rare ones that deserved the longest punishment possible. Why did Jeremy and Anthony do it? They were young, just 14 or 15, and possibly looking for money, trying to impress others, or maybe just making a poor decision in the moment. The reason may have been peer pressure or the thrill of the act. But one big question remains. Why did Ricky's story carry so much weight? Could things have been different if the truth about his testimony had come out earlier? Years later, something did change. In 2017, Ricky Stewart signed a legal statement saying he had not actually seen what happened. He said that the assistant district attorney, Laura Rodriguez, pressured him to speak against Jeremy. Ricky said she warned him that he could be charged himself if he didn't testify. She also promised to help him with his own legal troubles by giving him a private lawyer. That kind of pressure is against the rules. In legal terms, the government must share any helpful or favorable evidence with the defense team. That didn't happen here. As Jeremy's legal team worked on getting a new trial, the district attorney's office agreed to a new outcome. On December 1, 2017, when Jeremy was 23, he went back to court. The judge canceled his earlier conviction and gave him a new sentence of 25 years for taking part in the incident. Since he had already served over 7 years, he would now have a chance at release in his mid-20s. During the court hearing, Jeremy hugged Anthony Davis's mother and told her he was sorry. Laura Rodriguez, who now worked in the Restorative Justice Unit, said, "This case involved two boys who were very close friends and made very stupid mistakes. Was this change common? Not really. It looks like the only reason Louisiana was willing to reduce the sentence was because there was a real risk the entire case could fall apart. The original conviction was on shaky ground once the truth about Ricky's testimony came out. When Jeremy was first sentenced in 2013, it was for life without parole. The next victim cried, begged, they drove anyway." Dale Dwayne Craig was just 17 years old when something very serious happened on the night of September 14, 1992, in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He wasn't alone. 3 others were with him. Together, they targeted an 18-year-old college freshman named Kip E. Gullett. Kip had just started at Louisiana State University. That night, he was in the parking lot outside the Kirby Smith dorm when Craig and the others approached him. Craig hit Kip in the face with a weapon and forced him into his own Ford Bronco. Kip was scared. He cried and begged them to let him go. He told them his parents had money and would help. Craig didn't seem moved. He made Kip sit up straight and in a calm but disturbing way asked him, "You got any from your girlfriend tonight?" The group then drove around. They were looking for a quiet place. Kip kept pleading with them. During this time, Craig seemed unsure. He talked about either knocking Kip out or doing something far worse. At first, it looked like he agreed with the idea of just hurting him enough to leave him unconscious. But when they arrived at a construction site, things took a much darker turn. Craig and one of the others, James Levine, took Kip out of the vehicle. Levine hit him in the head with the back of his weapon, and Kip fell to the ground. Then, Craig got down next to him and used his weapon to fire 3 close-range shots to Kip's head. Later, Craig made threats to his friends. He told them not to talk. His words were, "If you say one ing word, I'll do the same to you. I told you I was hard." He even joked about hurting someone else just for fun. He answered himself, saying they shouldn't because the game warden might get mad. That same night, Craig took Kip's truck and drove it to his girlfriend's place. He told her exactly what had happened. The next day, Craig and the others tried to hide the evidence. They burned the truck near a levee and removed the stereo and other parts. Later, during a search of Craig's home, investigators found those parts along with Kip's keys. Anonymous tips helped police make progress. 2 of Craig's friends, including a 15-year-old named Berthelot, eventually spoke to the police. They gave statements and helped investigators arrest Craig and the others involved. Craig was officially charged under Louisiana law. he said he wasn't guilty. During the trial, both Levine and Berthelot agreed to testify against Craig. In return, they were hoping for less severe punishment. At one point, Craig tried to plead guilty to avoid the full trial, but the court didn't allow it. In Louisiana, you can't enter a guilty plea in this type of case unless it's a special kind. The trial continued. The jury decided Craig was guilty. In the next phase of the case, they looked at how serious the situation was. The jury agreed that Craig had taken part in forcibly taking someone against their will and had used a weapon during the act. They also agreed that what happened was extremely cruel. They decided Craig should face the strongest punishment available. The judge followed that recommendation and gave Craig a sentence that would have ended his life through government action. Craig tried to appeal, but in 1997, Louisiana's highest court confirmed that the original decision would stand. Legal changes and new outcome. In 2005, everything changed. The U.S. Supreme Court decided that anyone under 18 at the time of a capital offense could not receive that kind of sentence. Since Craig was only 17 during the event, this meant he now had a chance to receive a different punishment. His original sentence was removed. The court gave him a new sentence: life in prison. This meant he would serve time with no chance of early release, probation, or suspension. Later, Craig tried to reduce this new sentence too. He said it was unfair or too harsh. But in 2006, a Louisiana appeals court disagreed. They said that even if Craig hadn't used the weapon himself, just being involved in a serious theft where someone lost their life was enough to justify a life sentence. In fact, even the less serious version of the same charge would still result in life behind bars without parole. In 2023, things shifted again. Because of more recent court decisions involving young people and long sentences, Craig became eligible for a review. The court ruled he could now be considered for parole. That means a judge could decide to release him someday, but only after he served a minimum term, usually around 25 years, and only if the district attorney agrees.